The quiet hum of Outpost Meridian was shattered by the shrill sound of an emergency alert blaring through the station. Jake Morrison's heart skipped a beat as the lights flickered, the sharp tone cutting through his exhausted mind. He was on his third cup of coffee, the bitter liquid doing little to shake the weight of 10 years spent commanding humanity's furthest military station. His worn face, streaked with the beginnings of gray at his temples, reflected the years of silent struggle. He had seen everything, wars, betrayals, and the lonely expanse of space, but nothing had ever prepared him for this. He set down his mug, his eyes narrowing as the alert intensified. "What is it?" he muttered to himself, stepping over to the communications console. Lieutenant Danny Brooks, a young officer, was already at the terminal, his hands moving swiftly across the controls. "So you need to hear this," Danny said, his voice tight with concern, eyes wide. Jake leaned in, adjusting his headset. The voice that crackled through the static was soft, almost ethereal, musical, like wind chimes speaking words, soothing yet haunting. It was unmistakable. This is Velnar Colony. We are under attack. Please, we need help. The Krell, they are killing us." The words were desperate, broken. "We are being slaughtered, our children taken, no weapons, no way to fight back." Jake's blood ran cold. The Krell, he had heard the stories. The merciless, barbaric empire that crushed entire civilizations without a second thought. The Velnar, a peaceful species with their crystalline skin and tranquil ways, had no chance. Danny's face paled as he looked at Jake. "What do we do, sir?" he asked, almost in disbelief. Jake's hands tightened into fists. The Galactic Council, the supposedly united force that governed the galaxy, had sat idly by for years as the Krell expanded unchecked. The Velnar had been part of the Galactic Council, an ally, a peaceful member. Yet no one had lifted a finger to save them. "How many people are on that colony?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. 20,000, mostly civilians, farmers, teachers, families. Danny trailed off, his fingers still dancing across the console. The Krell hit hard, 3 warships in orbit, ground forces already occupying the main cities. Jake ran a hand through his gray hair, his mind racing. The Krell didn't take prisoners. They didn't ransom hostages. They enslaved, tortured, destroyed. The Velnar would be lost unless someone intervened. "And the Council?" Jake asked. Danny's jaw clenched. "They received the same message 6 hours ago. They're forming a committee to discuss the response. A preliminary report in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Jake repeated, his voice rising in anger. In 2 weeks, those people will be dead or worse. He couldn't wait, not with so many innocent lives on the line. Jake's hands slammed onto the console, bringing the message to a halt. "Get me Admiral Phillips," he ordered, voice cold. "Priority channel." 20 minutes later, the face of Admiral Phillips appeared on the screen. She was a woman of few words, her sharp eyes focused and calculating. A veteran of many conflicts, her expression was a reflection of someone who had seen the worst and had learned to carry it without hesitation. Her dark skin and stoic features were softened by the deep shadows under her eyes, a testament to the long hours of work. "I heard the message," she said before Jake could speak. "Every human station in the sector picked it up. The politicians are dragging their feet, but we know what's at stake." Jake didn't waste time. "Admiral, the Krell are slaughtering an innocent species. The Council will do nothing but discuss. We need to act now. Send help, send a fleet. If we wait, those people are gone." Phillips met his gaze, her eyes hardening. "You're right," she said after a long pause. "But humanity's position is fragile in the Galactic Council. If we act without their approval, we risk being expelled. We lose access to trade routes, technology, everything." Jake's fists clenched. "This isn't about politics, Admiral. This is about saving lives." "I agree, Jake," Phillips said, her voice tight. "I'll handle the politicians. You handle the rescue. How fast can you get a ship to Sarah's 4? Jake's chest tightened. "The Reaper is docked here for resupply. Captain Lisa Grant is on board with a full crew and a marine company. They can launch in 4 hours. Phillips gave him a grim nod. "Then we launch in 3. With that, the connection ended. Jake stood motionless for a moment. He closed his eyes, letting out a deep breath. Then, with a single, decisive step, he turned and made his way toward the command deck. The clock was ticking. As Jake steps onto the command deck, a new message flashes across the console, an encrypted transmission from Earth Command. The Krell Empire had just launched a retaliatory strike. Their fleet was on the move, heading straight for Earth space. The stakes had just escalated. The hum of Outpost Meridian's mechanical heart was deafening in the silence that followed Jake's urgent orders. His hands were steady as he directed the crew, their urgency reflected in their quick movements. The Reaper, humanity's latest warship, stood tall in the docking bay, bristling with weaponry and combat-ready systems. It was a machine built for war, but to Jake, it was their best hope. Captain Lisa Grant stood near the ship's command bridge, overseeing final preparations for their departure. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight braid, and her athletic frame, honed from years of combat, carried the weight of leadership with ease. She was calm, but Jake could see the storm beneath her composed demeanor. They were going to war, but war in this galaxy wasn't like any conflict humanity had faced before. The stakes were higher now, and the enemy more merciless. Lisa turned toward Jake as he approached, her blue eyes sharp. "You ready for this, sir?" Jake gave her a half-smile. "Ready as I'll ever be." She didn't return the smile, but nodded. "We're on a tight schedule. If we don't launch in the next 2 hours, we risk being too late." The Reaper wasn't the only ship in the fleet. A small group of human warships, the Valkyrie, the Havoc, the Cerberus, the Warhound, the Fury, the Devastator, and the Reckoning, would form the core of humanity's military response. The plan was simple: delay the Krell fleet long enough for the Velnar civilians to be evacuated. But even if they succeeded, they knew that the Krell were far more numerous, and the human fleet was outmatched. As the Reaper powered up, Jake stood with Admiral Phillips in the observation bay, staring out at the vastness of space. A fleet of Krell warships could be anywhere out there, and their intentions were clear: conquest, subjugation, destruction. Phillips' voice cut through the quiet tension. "Jake, we can't let this turn into another full-scale war. Not yet. We need a response, not a declaration of conflict." Jake turned to her, his face stern. "We're not the aggressors here, Admiral. The Krell started this. All we're doing is saving those who can't save themselves." She sighed, glancing back at the Reaper, where preparations were nearly complete. "You're right, but we've got to be careful. I'll handle Earth Command. You focus on the mission." Jake nodded, but his mind was already racing with possibilities. The Krell had come for a peaceful species, and they would stop at nothing to destroy or enslave them. He couldn't allow that to happen, not while he had the means to prevent it. The quiet hum of the ship was suddenly interrupted by a transmission from Lyra, the Velnar delegate who had joined the mission as an advisor and liaison. She had insisted on coming despite the pain of losing her people, her family. She was standing now at the communications station, her crystalline form glowing faintly in the dim light of the room. The Velnar had a beauty to them that was unlike anything Jake had ever seen before. A gentle, ethereal quality that contrasted starkly with the violence that was about to unfold. "Commander Morrison," Lyra's voice echoed through the intercom. I don't know what to say, but I must thank you. The Velnar are forever in your debt. You're our last hope." Jake's throat tightened, but he managed to keep his composure. "We're doing this because it's the right thing to do, Lyra. Don't worry, we'll get your people to safety." "I hope so," she said softly, "but it's hard not to wonder if this will all be enough. The Krell, they've never been defeated. We've seen their brutality firsthand." Jake walked over to the communications terminal, lowering his voice. "It's because they've never faced humanity before. We don't quit, not when lives are at stake." Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper. "I pray you're right." As the Reaper set course for Sarah's 4, the crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the mission. In the lower decks, Sergeant Amy Coleman was rallying the Marines, her voice commanding and strong. Amy was a woman of few words, but her presence alone was enough to steel the troops. She had been through enough wars to know that they were fighting for more than just victory. They were fighting for survival. "We're heading into hostile territory," Amy called out to her squad as they checked their weapons and armor. "The Krell aren't just soldiers, they're predators, but we're not the prey. We're not here to fight for glory. We're here to get people out. We're here to save lives." The Marines, clad in their powered armor, nodded in unison. Each of them knew the risks. Each of them had volunteered for this, knowing full well what it could cost. "Let's get this done, Marines," Amy continued. "We've trained for this. Now it's time to put everything on the line." Jake made his way to the command center, his thoughts heavy. The plan was straightforward, but the stakes were enormous. The Reaper's sensors pinged as they approached Sarah's 4's orbit. The Krell fleet, 3 massive warships, were already in place. If Jake's fleet didn't act fast, the planet would fall under Krell control in a matter of hours. As the Reaper dropped out of faster-than-light travel, the view screen displayed a terrifying sight. The Krell fleet was already preparing for bombardment. Jake's eyes narrowed. They had no time to waste. Before he could issue an order, a transmission came through from the Krell flagship, a deep, guttural voice booming across the comms. "This is Commander Vector of the Krell Empire. Surrender now, or your species will suffer the consequences." Jake's pulse quickened. The Krell had issued their first ultimatum and the clock was ticking. There was no turning back now. The cold emptiness of space seemed to close in around Jake as the Reaper and the human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. Sarah's 4 lay just ahead, a peaceful world now marred by the presence of the Krell warships. 3 massive ships, their dark exteriors gleaming menacingly, orbited the planet like vultures circling a dying prey. Jake's breath caught in his throat. These ships were more than just battleships. They were symbols of the Krell Empire's strength, the kind of strength that crushed entire civilizations. The Velnar didn't stand a chance against them. But humanity? Humanity had always fought back when it mattered most. "Status report, Lieutenant Brooks," Jake barked, his voice cutting through the quiet tension. Danny Brooks, sitting at the communications console, didn't hesitate. "We're detecting active targeting systems on all 3 Krell warships, sir. They've already begun preparing weapons. We're outgunned, outnumbered, and we've got no way to match their firepower head-on." Jake's heart raced, but his face remained calm. "We're not going to fight them head-on. We're going to make them fight on our terms. Captain Grant, are your ship and the fleet ready?" Captain Lisa Grant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ready as we'll ever be, sir. All systems are online. I've got the Valkyrie and the Cerberus lined up, ready to move as soon as we get the green light." "Good," Jake said, turning to face the command deck. "We're going to use the asteroid field near Sarah's 4 as our battlefield. We hit and run, make them waste time chasing us. The last thing we need is to give them a direct shot at the planet." Lisa's voice came back, a note of agreement in her tone. "We'll make it happen, Jake. Just remember, this is more than just a fight. We're buying time for the evacuation." Jake clenched his fists. It wasn't a victory they were after. It was survival. If they didn't buy enough time, the Velnar and everyone else on the planet would be doomed. The Reaper darted toward the asteroid field, its engines roaring as it shot toward the maze of rock and debris. Behind it, the human fleet followed in a tight formation, the smaller ships trailing in the wake of the warship's commanding presence. Meanwhile, on the surface of Sarah's 4, the situation was even more dire. The Velnar had been rounded up, their peaceful society shattered. Their homes were burning. Lyra stood among the wreckage of her people's capital city, her translucent skin glowing faintly in the dying light of the planet's sunset. Her heart ached for her people. She had thought they were safe in the Galactic Council, but she had been wrong. The Krell cared little for the treaties or agreements of peace. Her hand clenched around a piece of rubble she had salvaged from the wreckage of her family's home. Every part of her wanted to rush to the humans, to the Reaper, and beg them to save them, but she knew she couldn't. The Krell would soon learn humanity's resolve. They would fight back. Back in space, the Reaper's crew prepared for the first engagement. Sergeant Amy Coleman was in the hangar bay with her Marines, their faces determined, their bodies tense. Amy had seen enough war to recognize the signs of a looming battle. The air was thick with the weight of what was coming. She stood in front of them, her voice firm and steady. "You've been through worse, and you'll go through worse again. The Krell won't give up easily, but neither will we. This is not just about fighting. It's about saving lives." The Marines, battle-hardened but still carrying the weight of humanity's hopes, nodded silently. They were ready. Amy knew this wasn't a typical battle. There was no honor in facing an enemy like the Krell, just the cold, ruthless need to survive. They were humanity's first line of defense, and they would not fail. The Reaper was the first to make contact. Jake's voice rang through the ship's intercom, giving the order. "All hands prepare for evasive maneuvers. Initiate attack sequence." In the tactical room, Lieutenant Chris Harper's fingers danced across the controls. "The Krell are locking weapons on us. They're going to fire in 30 seconds, targeting the Valkyrie and the Cerberus next." "We can't give them that time," Jake said. "Move now, all ships full speed ahead, take them by surprise." The Reaper shot forward, diving straight into the asteroid field. The human fleet followed, each ship using the asteroids as cover, weaving in and out of the space debris. The Krell fleet hesitated for a moment, unsure of the human tactic. Lisa's voice came through the comms, focused and precise. "We're in position. We'll hit them fast, but don't expect them to back down. The Krell are masters of warfare. They'll retaliate. Jake didn't flinch. Let's see if their retaliation is faster than us. The first shot was fired from the Reaper's railguns, a violent crack that tore through space. A solid slug of metal, moving faster than light itself, slammed into the lead Krell warship before its shields could fully activate. The ship's hull buckled, the explosion throwing debris in every direction. The second Krell ship fired back, its plasma cannons charging up. The air seemed to crackle with the energy as the beams shot toward the human ships. Chris Harper worked quickly, guiding the Reaper through the debris field. "They're fast, but not fast enough," he said. "Their aim is off." Amy watched from the hangar bay, her hand gripping the railing as the battle unfolded on the view screen. "We're not out of this yet," she murmured to herself. "This is just the beginning." The Krell fleet, reeling from the first hit, responded quickly. Their warships moved with precision, closing in on the human ships as they darted through the asteroid field. A large Krell ship broke off from the formation, heading directly for the Reaper. "Brace for impact," Jake shouted, eyes locked onto the incoming enemy vessel. "Full evasive maneuvers." The Reaper veered hard to the left, barely dodging the Krell's shots. A missile from the Valkyrie shot past, narrowly missing the Krell ship's shields. But then came a loud crash. The Reaper's shields faltered as a direct hit struck its port side. The ship lurched, throwing everyone off balance. "Shields holding at 60%, Chris reported, his voice calm but tense. "We can't keep this up forever, sir." Jake's jaw clenched. "We don't need to, we just need to keep them busy long enough." As the Reaper turned to make another evasive maneuver, Jake saw something that sent a chill down his spine. The remaining Krell warships had begun to charge their engines, their weapons aimed directly at the human fleet. A terrifying thought crossed Jake's mind. The Krell were about to unleash their full fury, and this time there would be no dodging their wrath. "Captain, we need to pull back," Jake ordered. But before Lisa could respond, the Krell warship broke apart with a massive explosion, not from their own attack, but from a sudden, unexpected force from the depths of the asteroid field. Another human ship had joined the fray. "Who the hell is that?" Jake asked, eyes wide. The answer would be more surprising than he could have ever imagined. The Reaper lurched as a second explosion rocked the Krell warship, the enemy ship splitting into two massive chunks of wreckage. The unexpected intervention left Jake momentarily disoriented as he tried to process what had just happened. "Who the hell is that?" Jake demanded, his voice sharp as he glanced toward the view screen. The remains of the Krell ship drifted like debris in the void, its once mighty hull now shattered beyond recognition. Another ship emerged from behind the asteroid field, its silhouette distinct in the faint starlight. The ship was smaller than the Krell warships, but clearly formidable, its sleek design cutting through space with expert precision. Its weapons were already deployed, and its hull was adorned with an unfamiliar insignia. "Not one of ours," Chris Harper responded from his station, his fingers racing across the console. "It's the Sovereign class, not a military vessel but a private contractor ship. Wait, no, that's the Salvation." Jake's heart skipped. He knew that name. The Salvation was a notorious mercenary vessel, known for taking on jobs no one else would, operating just outside the law but with a reputation for getting results. "Salvation," Jake repeated, half in disbelief. "They're not supposed to be here." "They're here," Philip's voice came through the comms, calm but tinged with surprise. "I've been in touch with their captain. They've received intel about the Krell's movements. They're here to help." Jake's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. He hadn't expected a mercenary group to show up in the middle of an intergalactic conflict, especially not when the stakes were so high. But if the Salvation was here, they weren't just here to watch. They were here to fight. Lyra stood in the observation room of the Reaper, watching the battle unfold. Her translucent skin glowed faintly in the dim light as she stared at the chaotic dance of destruction in space. The human ships darted between asteroids with terrifying speed, while the Krell fleet retaliated with relentless force. Her heart ached for her people below, the Velnar, a peaceful species who had never known war. But today, their fate was tied to humanity's resolve. The humans didn't hesitate. They fought with a fury that was equal parts fear, compassion, and an unrelenting desire to protect the innocent. But Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the verge of something much darker. If they didn't stop the Krell soon, if the battle dragged on, there would be more casualties than she could bear. She had no illusions about the scale of what was happening. Humanity's war against the Krell wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for a galaxy's soul. And the more time passed, the more she realized that no one could stay neutral in this war. She turned away from the viewport as the alarms blared. The battle was escalating. The Reaper was taking fire, and the Velnar's hope of survival rested on the shoulders of the human soldiers. In the hangar bay, Sergeant Amy Coleman stood in front of her squad, her boots firmly planted on the ground. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed the weight of what was to come. "Listen up," Amy called, her voice clear and strong. "We've got civilians to save and Krell soldiers to fight. You know what's at stake. You know what they did to the Velnar." The Marines around her checked their weapons, their motions precise and practiced. Amy's words carried weight, the kind of weight that only years of combat could provide. They were ready. "Remember what we're fighting for," she continued. "This isn't about us, it's about them. It's about the people who can't fight for themselves. The Velnar don't know war. We're here to teach them that there's still hope, that not all species are cruel like the Krell." The Marines nodded, their faces set in grim determination. Amy's squad was one of the best. They had trained for this, fought in similar conditions before, but this battle was different. The Krell were not just soldiers, they were predators, and the Marines had to be more than just soldiers, they had to be protectors. "Load up, Marines. We're not leaving anyone behind," Amy finished, her voice low and steady. "Let's make it count." Back in space, the Reaper had already sustained heavy damage from the Krell's retaliation. Shields were down to 40%, and the ship was limping, but it was still fighting. The Krell warships were relentless, and despite the arrival of the Salvation, the battle wasn't turning in their favor. Not yet. "Captain Grant," Jake called over the comms, "what's the situation on the front lines?" "We've taken heavy losses, but we're still in the fight," Lisa responded. Her voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of urgency. "We can't keep this up forever. The Krell are getting smarter. They're coordinating their attacks." Jake clenched his jaw, frustration building. "I don't have time for that, Lisa. We need a new plan now." Before she could respond, another explosion rocked the Reaper, and the ship shuddered under the impact. "We've got incoming," Chris yelled from the tactical station. "Another wave of Krell fighters, they're swarming us." "Damn it," Jake muttered under his breath. "Pull back, all ships, fall back into the asteroid field. We need to regroup and get a defensive perimeter up." But as the Reaper began its retreat, another incoming message appeared on the main screen. This one was from the Salvation. The mercenary captain's face appeared, his expression grim but determined. "We've got a situation," the captain said. "The Krell are pushing harder than we expected. We need more time. You've got to hold them off longer. We can't keep this up alone." Jake's mind raced. The human fleet couldn't take much more, and with the Krell closing in, they were running out of options. But then a thought struck him. The asteroid field was their only advantage. They needed to use it, make it their weapon. Jake turned to Phillips, his mind racing through strategies, when a chilling transmission interrupted. The voice of Commander Vector, the Krell leader, boomed over the comms. "You cannot win this, human. Surrender your forces now, and we will spare your pathetic species the agony of complete destruction." Jake stood tall, his voice steady as he responded. "You'll never break us, Vector. We'll fight until every last one of you is gone. And then we'll rebuild the galaxy piece by piece." But just as the Krell leader's taunt faded, a new signal appeared, a massive, unmarked ship, appearing from deep within the asteroid field. The ship's markings were unfamiliar, and its silhouette was massive. Jake's gut clenched. What the hell is that? The unexpected arrival of this new ship could be the game-changer humanity needed, or it could be the beginning of their final, desperate fight. The massive shadow of the unmarked ship loomed in space, emerging from the dense asteroid field like a titan, its sleek hull reflecting the distant light of the stars. Its size alone was enough to send a ripple of unease through the bridge crew of the Reaper. "Is that another Krell ship?" Jake asked, narrowing his eyes. "No," Chris Harper responded quickly from the tactical station, his fingers flying across the console. "It's not Krell, but it's not anything we've seen before either. Its markings are completely foreign." Jake stood still, his mind whirling. The situation had already been precarious enough. With the Krell pressing in from all sides, the last thing they needed was another unknown entity complicating their already fragile defense. "Get me a visual on that ship," Jake ordered, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. If this was another adversary, humanity would be out of options. But if it was something else, they could still have a chance. The comms officer quickly complied, and within moments the view screen flickered to life. The unmarked ship slowly rotated, revealing a set of symbols etched into its outer hull. They weren't alien glyphs, but instead something human, something familiar. The symbols were simple, a crossed hammer and wrench set beneath a stylized eagle. The markings were unmistakable. "Wait," Jake said, his heart skipping. That ship, it's a Terran freighter class. I thought they were all decommissioned years ago." "They were," Chris replied, his voice full of disbelief. "But that ship, it's flying under a different flag now. I'm getting a match from the database, the Salvation." A surge of realization hit Jake like a shockwave. He had heard the rumors, whispers of renegade human mercenaries working outside the authority of the Galactic Council, taking on contracts too dangerous for anyone else. The Salvation, it seemed, was no myth. "Mercenaries?" Philip's voice crackled from the intercom. "What are they doing here?" Jake gritted his teeth. "It looks like they've come to finish what we started. That ship, been in the fight for a while, probably hunting down Krell's ships as mercenary contractors." Lyra's voice suddenly echoed in the background of the command room, her tone filled with awe. "I knew humanity had their warriors, but I did not know they had mercenaries like this." "Neither did I," Jake muttered under his breath. The ship's sheer firepower, now apparent, became clear as it unleashed a barrage of missiles toward the Krell warships. The explosions were deafening, sending shockwaves that rattled the very core of the battlefield. A series of blinding flashes lit up space as the missiles found their targets, sending one of the Krell ships spiraling out of control. The Krell fleet responded with fury. Missiles and plasma bolts collided in a fiery storm of destruction, lighting up the dark void of space like a war zone. But the Salvation fought with calculated efficiency, using evasive maneuvers that seemed to come from a master tactician. Their weapons were precise, each strike disabling a key component of the Krell warships. "This could work," Jake said, a flicker of hope in his chest. "If we can keep the pressure on them, we might actually stand a chance." While the mercenary ship provided much-needed firepower, the human fleet was still struggling to hold the line. The Krell weren't just fighters, they were predators, and every move humanity made was met with overwhelming retaliation. Their warships loomed large, each one more imposing than the last. Lisa Grant stood tall on the bridge of the Reaper, watching the chaos unfold with grim determination. Her crew worked seamlessly together as the ship shook from incoming fire. "We're not out of this yet," she said, her voice steady. "We need to make them pay for every inch of ground they take." Jake approached her, his eyes fixed on the tactical readouts. "I'm pulling every ship into position. We need to buy time for the civilians." "What about the Salvation?" Lisa asked, her brow furrowing. "Should we rely on them?" "We take any help we can get," Jake replied, glancing at the view screen where the mercenary ship continued to tear through the Krell's defenses. The Salvation's captain appeared on the comm screen once again. His voice was rough but calm, his face showing the exhaustion of someone who had fought 1,000 battles. "Commander Morrison, Captain Grant," the mercenary leader said, "we've been monitoring the Krell movements. We can provide more firepower, but this won't be a walk in the park. Those ships are tough." Jake exchanged a look with Lisa, who gave a firm nod. "Do what you can. We're going to need everything you've got to stop them." The mercenary captain's face grew more serious. "Understood. We'll finish off their forward fleet. You focus on the backline. We'll keep them distracted while you extract those civilians." While the Reaper continued its tactical retreat, focusing on drawing the Krell into the maze of asteroids, Amy Coleman's Marines began the first wave of the ground assault. As the Reaper's shuttles dropped to the surface, the Marines filed out into the dirt and grass of Sarah's 4. "We move fast, we save who we can, and we don't leave anyone behind," Amy shouted over the din of the landing zone. Her team responded with disciplined precision, checking weapons, locking down perimeter defenses, and advancing into the heart of the city. The Velnar civilians were still trapped in their homes and in holding pens set up by the Krell. The situation was grim, their forces outnumbered by more than 10 to 1, with the Krell holding the highest ground. Marine Squad Alpha, you're with me? Amy barked, pushing forward. We're going to clear that holding pen. Back in space, the battle was shifting in humanity's favor. The Salvation had dealt another devastating blow to the Krell flagship, disabling its primary weapons system. The Krell began to pull back slightly, regrouping to mount a counterattack. But just as Jake began to think the tide might be turning, a new, larger threat appeared on the edge of the battlefield. Another Krell fleet, even more massive than the first, had arrived. Jake's heart sank. The Salvation had helped, but humanity wasn't out of danger yet. Admiral Phillips, Jake called into the comms. We've got incoming a second Krell fleet. They're closing in fast. Lisa's voice rang out over the comms. We're outgunned. We can't fight them all off, not like this. As Jake watched the approaching Krell fleet, something in his gut told him they were facing the ultimate test of survival. The Reaper was already pushing its limits, and the Salvation couldn't fight forever. Desperation hung in the air, but there was still hope. At that moment, Jake made a split-second decision. Bring the Reaper in close, Jake ordered. It's time we finish this. But before they could close the distance, an even more unexpected twist occurred. An encrypted transmission from Earth Command arrived. The message contained a single line. A third fleet is en route to your location. Hold the line. Reinforcements are coming. But would they arrive in time? The countdown to humanity's survival had begun. The tension in the air was palpable as Jake stood at the command deck, his hands gripping the console with the kind of intensity that matched the gravity of the situation. The Krell fleet, now bolstered by a second wave, loomed menacingly in the distance, while the first wave of their warships drifted back into formation, their weapons ready to fire. We're out of time, Jake muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on the vastness of space. We've got to buy the civilians more time, and we've got to stop that second fleet from getting any closer. Philip's voice came over the comms, calm but unmistakably tense. The second fleet's too large for us to handle head-on, Jake. Even with the Salvation backing us up, we're stretched too thin. We don't have the firepower to keep them at bay for much longer. Jake's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to think clearly. They couldn't fight the Krell directly, they had to play to their strengths. They had to use their environment, their knowledge, their speed. Chris, can we get another round of jamming on the Krell fleet? Jake asked, glancing over at the tactical station. Chris Harper was already on it. I've got drones positioned around their perimeter. I'll scramble their targeting systems for a few minutes, but it won't last long. After that, their weapons will lock onto us like a damn heat-seeking missile. We'll make it last longer, Jake said, his eyes flicking to the view screen. The second Krell fleet, colossal and imposing, was closing in fast. Their overwhelming numbers threatened to wipe them out completely if they didn't act. He quickly turned to Phillips. Admiral, we're pulling back again. We'll force them to chase us into the asteroid field. If they want to get to the planet, they'll have to go through us. Meanwhile, on the surface of Sarah's 4, Sergeant Amy Coleman's Marines had breached the Krell's perimeter, fighting their way through the wreckage of a once peaceful city. The Velnar civilians, many of them scared and broken, were finally being evacuated, but the battle was far from over. Amy led her squad into the heart of the city, guns blazing as the Krell soldiers swarmed to stop them. The ground shook beneath their feet with each explosion, the air filled with the smell of smoke and burning metal. Move, move, Amy shouted as the Marines rushed forward, gunning down any Krell soldiers in their path. The sound of plasma fire was deafening as the Krell responded with unrelenting force, their massive bodies towering over the humans. But the Marines fought with fierce determination, cutting through the Krell lines and advancing toward the civilian shelters. Amy's voice was like steel as she barked orders, the adrenaline of the battle taking over. Keep moving, she yelled, grabbing one of her troops by the shoulder. We don't stop until every last civilian is on those transports. Her team was relentless, working in perfect synchronization as they cleared each building, each street, making sure that no one was left behind. In space, Jake's strategy was beginning to take shape. As the Reaper and the rest of the human fleet pulled into the asteroid field, Jake's heart raced with a mix of hope and dread. The asteroid field would be their best chance, but it would be a tight squeeze. The Krell fleet was closing in, their weapons charging. The Reaper was heavily damaged, its shields barely holding, but the Salvation was still fighting, its mercenary crew making a last stand to draw the Krell's attention away from the Reaper. They're not going to get through this, Lisa Grant muttered under her breath, watching the tactical readout. We're too exposed. Jake shook his head. No, we pull them into the asteroid field. The terrain will make their weapons less effective and will have the advantage in speed. We're running out of time, Jake, Phillips said, her voice grave. The Krell fleet won't hesitate to destroy us once they've cleared the debris field. Jake didn't answer immediately. He was calculating their every move, every risk. The Salvation had been their lifeline, but they couldn't rely on it forever. The time for playing it safe was over. We'll get them moving. Full speed ahead, Jake commanded. Once we're deep in the field, we make every shot count. We'll take out their engines one ship at a time. On the surface, Amy's squad was securing the last group of civilians, leading them to the transports. The Marines were exhausted, their energy spent, but their resolve was unwavering. Come on, get to the transport, Amy shouted, her voice hoarse from hours of fighting. The last of the civilians boarded, but just as Amy turned to board the transport herself, a scream pierced the air. One of the Velnar children had been left behind, still trapped under the wreckage of a collapsed building. No, Amy shouted, her heart racing as she ran back into the smoke-filled ruins. Where is she? A Marine pointed toward the wreckage. Over there, Sergeant, she's trapped beneath the debris. Amy didn't hesitate. She rushed to the fallen structure, using her strength to lift the rubble away. Blood stained her armor as she reached the girl, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Hey, it's okay. We're getting you out, Amy whispered, her heart pounding. With a final heave, she freed the girl, pulling her to safety. Thank you, the child whispered, tears streaming down her face. We're getting you out of here, Amy said firmly, taking the girl in her arms and carrying her toward the transport. You're going to be okay. Back in space, the human fleet was in the heart of the asteroid field. Jake could see the massive Krell warships on his tactical display, their forms barely visible through the field of debris. Chris, how long can we keep this up? Jake asked. We've got maybe 20 minutes, Chris replied, his voice tinged with exhaustion. After that, the Krell will either break through or adapt. We need to destroy those ships now. Jake's mind was sharp, every second counting. It's time, he said, voice resolute. Everyone focus on the engines. We're not going to destroy them, we're going to cripple them. The Reaper surged forward, narrowly dodging incoming fire as it flew deeper into the asteroid field. The ship's weapons began to fire, each shot finding its mark on the Krell warship's engines, slowly but surely taking them down one by one. Just as the first Krell ship's engines began to falter, a voice crackled through the comms. It was the voice of Commander Vector. You cannot win this, human. You have shown strength, but it is the strength of desperation. The Krell do not fear death. We will burn your world to the ground, and nothing will stand in our way. Jake's blood ran cold. He knew the Krell would stop at nothing to destroy humanity, but Vector's words were a stark reminder of the stakes. But just as he prepared to respond, a new signal appeared from Earth Command. The message was brief, a single line flashing across the screen. Reinforcements are en route. Prepare for final engagement. Jake's heart surged with a mixture of relief and dread. But would the reinforcements arrive in time? The battle wasn't over yet. The clock was ticking. The final moments of the battle unfolded in a blur of chaos, as the Reaper and the remaining human ships pushed deeper into the asteroid field. The Krell fleet, though massive and heavily armed, was beginning to show cracks in its formidable armor. One by one, the Krell warships were losing power, their engines slowly sputtering and failing under the relentless barrage from humanity's fleet. The Salvation continued its work, using hit-and-run tactics that kept the Krell distracted, but they could only do so much. The human fleet was taking hits. The Valkyrie was drifting, its starboard side torn apart by a direct plasma blast. The Warhound had lost its forward weapons array, and the Cerberus was on the brink of losing power entirely. Still, they fought on, every shot a defiance, every maneuver a testament to humanity's resilience. Almost there, Commander, Chris Harper said, his voice urgent as he worked furiously at the controls. The last Krell ship's shield is almost down. A couple more hits and we've got them. Jake stood in front of the view screen, watching the colossal Krell ship as it struggled against the onslaught. The stars beyond the asteroid field seemed almost too peaceful, too calm. He could feel the weight of every life that had been lost, the lives of the Velnar, his own crew, the innocent civilians. But they weren't done yet. "Give it everything we've got," Jake ordered, his voice firm as the ship's weapons primed for their final shot. "We finish this now." The Reaper's railguns roared to life, and the massive slug of metal shot across the void. The Krell ship's shields flickered, and then collapsed under the force of the impact. With a final explosion that rattled the Reaper's hull, the Krell flagship was no more. The debris scattered into space, and the remaining Krell warships, their control systems damaged beyond repair, drifted helplessly. "Victory," Lisa Grant's voice came through the comms, quieter than usual but full of pride. "We've done it, Jake. The Krell fleet is down." Jake exhaled, his body sagging with relief. He looked out over the battlefield, where the wreckage of the Krell ships hung motionless in the starry sky, a grim reminder of what they had just survived. But it wasn't over yet. On the surface of Sarah's 4, the Marines were still securing the last of the Velnar civilians. The ground was littered with the debris of battle, the bodies of Krell soldiers scattered amidst the ruins of the city. Despite the victory, there was little joy to be found here. Amy Coleman stood in front of a group of Velnar survivors, her Marines at attention behind her. The Velnar, with their crystalline bodies, seemed like ghosts, their features etched with the trauma of war. They had been torn apart by the Krell, but they were alive thanks to humanity's intervention. "We did it," Amy said, her voice hoarse but resolute. "You're safe now, but it's not over. We still have a lot of work to do." Lyra, standing just behind her, looked out over the refugees, her eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "I never thought this day would come," she whispered, almost to herself, "that anyone would care enough to help us." Amy's eyes softened. "We do what we can. No one deserves to live under the boot of an empire like that." Lyra looked up at Amy, her face etched with both grief and admiration. "The galaxy. It's different now, because of you, because of humanity." Back in space, the human fleet remained vigilant, but the battle was over. The Krell had been defeated, their forces scattered, their empire left in disarray. Jake allowed himself a moment to breathe, but he knew that the war was far from over. The Krell might have been beaten for now, but their empire was vast, and there were other threats out there. Still, Jake knew that humanity had proven something important. He turned to Phillips, who had come to join him in the command center. "We did it," Jake said, the weight of those two words carrying more meaning than he could put into speech. Phillips nodded slowly. "For now, but there will be more. There's always more." Jake turned his gaze to the stars, to the future. "Then we'll be ready." On Earth, the message of humanity's victory spread quickly. The Galactic Council, stunned by humanity's swift and decisive action, convened in emergency sessions to determine the next course of action. Earth's status within the Council had never been more uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had proven its worth, not just as another species within the galaxy, but as its protector. Ambassador Helen Price stood at the forefront of the diplomatic debates, her presence a calm yet powerful influence on the discussions. She had represented humanity in the Galactic Council for years, and now her voice was stronger than ever. "We've shown them what we're capable of," she said during the Council's meeting, her voice unwavering. "Not through words, but through action. Humanity does not stand by and watch innocents suffer. We protect them, and we will continue to do so." A tense silence fell over the Council chamber as Helen's words resonated with every representative. Some species, still wary of humanity's methods, were reluctant to offer their full support. But there were others, those who had witnessed the brutality of the Krell firsthand, who understood the power of humanity's compassion. In the end, a new resolution passed, one that formalized humanity's role as a protectorate species within the Galactic Council. Earth would be given the authority to respond to threats to innocent species with military force, but under strict oversight and rules of engagement. Humanity had won its place among the stars. Back on Sarah's 4, Jake watched from the observation deck of the Reaper as the last of the Velnar refugees boarded their transport ships. The human fleet had taken a heavy toll, but it had achieved the impossible, and the galaxy, for better or worse, would never be the same. Lyra came to stand beside him, her crystal-like skin glowing softly in the dim light. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved us." Jake met her gaze, a solemn nod accompanying his words. "We didn't do it alone." The Reaper began its journey back to Earth, leaving behind a galaxy that was forever changed. A galaxy that now knew the price of peace, the cost of war, and the strength of humanity. As the Reaper sped through the depths of space, Jake stood alone in the observation room, looking out over the stars. He had fought countless battles, led men and women into the crucible of war, but this fight, this victory, would remain etched in his memory forever. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge yet, and they had emerged victorious. The road ahead was uncertain, the future full of unknowns. But one thing was clear: humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors. And with that, the galaxy began to understand the true power of the human spirit. It wasn't just about survival. It was about standing up for those who couldn't. It was about making the hard choices, even when the price was steep. And as humanity's fleet sailed back into the unknown, they knew that their story was just beginning.